We understand that it's very difficult for many people at the moment. But the board also...
But the reality is we don't care. We have no choice. Unlucky.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the corporations were a bit greedy during the pandemic. I'm sorry. But unfortunately, you must pay.
I'll give you a little bit of it. I can't be bothered watching the whole thing because I literally just know. But you can have a little bit because like this is dry. This is the speech about why interest rates got raised again.
Good morning, everybody, and Tim, thank you for that introduction. It's a real pleasure and honour to be able to join you at your annual Australian Summit. This morning I would like to discuss the narrow path that the Reserve Bank Board is seeking to navigate. That path is one in which inflation returns to target within a reasonable time frame, while the economy continues to grow and we hold on to as many of the gains in the labour market as we possibly can. I think it is still possible to navigate this path, and it's certainly our ambition to do exactly that. But it's a narrow path and it's likely to be a bumpy one, and there are risks on both sides, and I'll talk about some of those risks this morning. But really what I want to start off doing is to talk about the importance of the destination. That is a sustainable return of inflation to the target range. And I'd also like to talk about our strategy for getting to that destination, including yesterday's decision to increase the cash rate again.
Blue, absolutely. Absolutely. The reason I'm showing this is because it is boring as fuck, but we're getting it straight from the horse's mouth. So we're going to hear how they justify their reaction to what's going on.
The recent inflation readings have been the highest in more than 30 years.
Yay!
And the reasons for this are well known. They include the supply-side disruptions caused by the pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the very large fiscal and monetary stimulus that was delivered to support economies during the pandemic. And our job as Australia's central bank is to make sure that this period of high inflation is only temporary. And it's really important that we're successful here. High inflation is corrosive. It erodes the value of money and people's savings. It puts pressure on household budgets, and it makes life harder for businesses, and it distorts investment. Inflation makes us all poorer, and it hurts people on low incomes the most.
Well, at least he knows. I don't think it's going to make him much poorer, but at least he knows. Unfortunately, some of you may die. But only for a little while.
And if inflation stays too high for too long, it will become ingrained in people's expectations, and then the high inflation will become self-perpetuating. As the historical experience clearly demonstrates, the inevitable result of this would be even higher interest rates, and at some point a larger increase in unemployment to get rid of the ingrained inflation. And the board's priority is to do what it can.
Strawman gifted a tier 1 sub to Lord Farquaad.
Literally, I don't know if there's a better answer. And if there is a better answer, it's not like any of us fuckers have any way to be able to deal with it. All we can try and do is educate ourselves. He has to sit here. And I mean, I understand you have to make difficult decisions. I understand being in positions of power. To a certain point, you have to make difficult decisions. The reality is this man probably knows that people will die because of the cost of living crisis. These interest rates, where they're at right now, people will die. Financial pressure is one of those things that can lead to self-harm, relationship breakdowns, abuse. The level is a bad level. And to an extent, he has to know that. He has to know that. And the way he justifies it in his mind, I'm sure, is, well, I have to make it hard for some people now. The poor. Because otherwise, everyone will suffer for longer. That's what I've heard so far.
Measures of capacity utilisation from surveys, which is shown in the top panel here. But it's also evident in the labour market, which has been very tight. And recently the unemployment rate has been around the lowest it's been in 50 years.
Because everyone's fucking poor
It's
and you
clear
don't
that
pay us
the
enough.
level of demand in the economy has been pushing up against the supply capacity of the economy, and this has been contributing recently to the upward pressure on prices. The return of inflation to target does require a more sustainable balance between aggregate demand and aggregate supply in the economy. And the tool that the RBA has to use to achieve this balance is interest rates. I acknowledge that this tool comes with some complications. Its effects are felt unevenly across the community, and rising interest rates are causing significant financial pressures for some households. But this unevenness is not a reason to avoid using the tool that we have.
The system is so broken. It's so broken.
If we had not tightened monetary policy, the cost of living would be higher for longer. This would hurt all Australians and the functioning of our economy. This would ultimately require even higher interest rates to get inflation to come back down again, and more unemployment. So, as difficult as it is, the rise in interest rates has been necessary to bring inflation back to target within a reasonable time frame. The evidence suggests that the higher interest rates are working and that inflation is coming down. As you can see in this chart, in the March quarter, CPI inflation rate peaked at 7.8%, and it's now coming down. Subsequent to the March quarter, the monthly CPI indicator showed a pickup in the 12-month ended inflation rate in April to 6.8%. This monthly outcome was a little higher than we had expected, but it has not changed the fundamental assessment.
Tavrulis, and this is the thing. Corporations are the reason we get into these inflation. We're not experiencing regular old inflation like the old days. We're experiencing a new kind of inflation that is based around capitalist greed. The capitalist greed of companies, the capitalist greed of the oil and gas industry. Because capitalism has one goal, and that is exponential growth of profit per quarter. Must deliver profits to shareholders every quarter, and if you're not growing, you're losing. And this is what pisses me off, because every time a society experiences this situation, it's not the corporations that suffer, it's the people. Because the corporations do what they do every time. A massive restructure happens. They don't have to deal with inflationary pressures. They just fire the people they can't afford to pay. So profit continues the way it has for the stakeholders every fucking quarter. Meanwhile, poor people who, in my opinion, were somewhat tricked into buying property during the pandemic with record low interest rates and incentives to purchase homes, can no longer afford those mortgages. It's not the people with multiple, properties that are suffering here. It's the families. It's the young families. It's the people who, during the pandemic, maybe were like, you know what, we'll have a kid and we'll buy a house. Maybe this is the time for us to settle down. And those two people put their savings together, got a deposit. Maybe they got one of the 5%, deposit rates. So they could just afford. And the banks were overlending. The banks were offering these people more than they could probably afford because it was such a good deal. And all of these fixed term home loans at 2-point-something%, because of these inflation rates, as of June, are now at something like 6% or more. Someone can give me the exact right figure, because they go out of my brain like fucking glue, because they change every fucking 2 months. Anyway, not the point. It's not the corporations that ever pay for greedflation. It is the people. And all that is to me is that it is the people that suffer the results of these decisions. And there has to be a better way. And I know that a lot of people come in here and they go, capitalism's the best we've got. Yeah, well, why don't we try and make it better? Why don't we try and find a way to like actually not vilify the poor, to have people trapped in debt for their entire lives?
If we exclude the volatile items and the travel component of the CPI, inflation was 5.5% in 6-month annualised terms in April. That's 2 percentage points lower than it was in October last year. So inflation is coming down. This declining...
That's also, don't panic. Don't panic, everything's going to be fine. That's what it is. This is to the corporations. Everything's going to be fine because inflation is coming down. Don't stress. Also, it's a huge problem that so many companies, especially online ones, overexpanded during the pandemic. Cough, this platform is one of those platforms.
And in declining prices in global markets. As you can see here, oil prices have reversed much of the increase that followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the prices of many base metals have also declined, as have the prices of many food commodities in global markets, and you can see here the prices of wheat and beef have both come down.
Yeah, so they just keep saying the same thing over and over again to reduce panic, kiddo. That's what they do.
Similarly, the prices of international shipping has normalised after the spike during the pandemic. And in time, these lower shipping costs and lower commodity prices should be reflected in the prices that Australians pay for goods and services. But working in the other direction, services price inflation in Australia remains very high, rents are increasing quickly, and there'll be further large increases in electricity prices this year. In addition, unit labour costs are increasing briskly, an issue that I'm going to return to in a few moments. And these developments mean that
I regret buying the jelly beans. I regret buying the jelly beans. I just wanted to feel some joy. There is none. Honestly, that $7 that I spent today, I could have saved that and maybe bought a house one day, you know?
it is too early to declare victory in the battle against inflation. The path back to 2 to 3% is likely to involve a couple of years of relatively slow growth in the economy, and we're likely to receive...
Cool, a couple of years. Oh, this is so good. I'm so fine. I'm fine. I'm so fine. This is going to be fine. Do you know how to give yourself an existential crisis? Watching this and then going into the Twitch news.
Confirmation of that later this morning. Even so, as the board navigates the path back to 2 to 3%,
Here, have a house.
Let's be honest, JI, it's probably just going on more jelly beans. Because, okay, hear me out. I've got a new logic for everyone. As I am the logic bro of your dreams. And I have a new logic. The new logic is, with 1,000 bits, I can buy more jelly beans. Now, jelly beans bring me immediate joy. That is perk number 1. Perk number 2 is that they potentially lead to diabetes, shortening my lifespan. Which means not only will I have to survive thinking about how I never owned a house for less time. I'm sure there's other perks. Just let me think for a minute. There's more. It's a very good. It's a very good. Jay, thank you for the 1,000 biddies. Note for chat: this only works in countries with subsidized insulin. Oh.
it's seeking to preserve as many of the gains in the labour market as is possible to do. One of the unsung but very positive side effects of the pandemic was a once-in-a-generation improvement in the Australian labour market. Over recent months, as you can see in this next chart, a higher share of Australians have had a job than ever before, and the youth unemployment rate has been the lowest it's been in many decades. There are very real and very tangible economic and social benefits to this. It's a significant achievement.
Thank you for the roses, Squid.
And our ambition at the Reserve Bank is to return inflation to target while holding on to as many
Everything must stay the same because otherwise capitalism will fail, and that would be so bad for everybody, but mostly the corporations whom we love protecting. Yeah! Did you like that? Chat, I'm losing it.
of these gains as is possible. I want to make it clear, though, that the desire to preserve the gains in the labour market does not mean that the board will tolerate higher inflation persisting. There is a limit to how long inflation can stay above the target range.
Okay, do you know what? I've got a new logic. I have a new logic. What we're going to do is we're just going to bully the poor and stop them from buying food and housing and basically the things that they already can't afford. And then inflation will slow quicker. And then that'll be perfect. What do we think? Good? Good. Good? Moral. Moral. Feels good. Moral.
The longer it stays there, the greater the risk that inflation expectations adjust, and the harder and the more costly it will be to get inflation back to target.
This man is mad at me for buying jelly beans. This man doesn't know that I'm just going through some shit right now, and I really needed jelly beans, and he's mad at me for buying jelly beans. Fuck. It's true, it is my fault. I'm the one damaging the economy. Every single jelly bean I bought today damaged the economy so hard. Oh, women, they're the worst.
Yesterday's decision to increase interest rates again was taken to provide greater confidence that inflation will return to target within a reasonable time frame. It follows recent information that suggested greater upside risk to the bank's inflation outlook. Services price inflation is proving persistent here and overseas, and the recent data on inflation, on wages and on housing prices were higher than we had factored into our forecasts.
Oh. Chat, we love it when... I'm sorry. Oh, I get a warm, fuzzy feeling when men admit that they make mistakes. Good on you, King. Good on you, King. Shame you got it wrong and we're all paying for it. But we love him. We love a man who can admit they did something wrong. So, 1 point for you.
Given this shift in risks and the already fairly drawn-out return of inflation to target, the board judged that a further increase in interest rates was warranted. In making this decision, the board had a very detailed discussion of the slowdown in household spending and the stresses that some households are under because of higher interest rates and higher rents. We understand that it's very difficult for many people at the moment. But the board also...
But the reality is we don't care. We have no choice. Unlucky. Chat, should I give this man more credit? Should I give this man more credit? Should I give him more credit? I don't want to. But maybe he's actually a nice person. Maybe I should give him just a little bit more credit. No? Okay, cool. I'm glad everybody's on the same page.
Also considered the cost for households and the economy of inflation staying too high for too long. It's in Australia's interest that we get...
This man's just looking out for my next year's summer body. If you can only afford 1 meal a day, this man, I get it. He just wants to see lots of hot people at the beach next summer. He's just like, okay, this is what we're doing in a real roundabout way. What we're going to do is we're going to starve everyone because they can't afford food. But then there'll be so many hot people next summer. It's actually Jesus. That was a cross between Jesus and genius, and neither of... Never mind. Moving on.
And I'd like to briefly discuss 4 of these. The first is developments in the global economy. Economic growth in the advanced economies is slowing as restrictive monetary policy has its effect. Even so, labour markets have been surprisingly resilient in many economies.
I've been here 2 minutes. Yes. So basically we have spoken about the fact that the RBA has one lever and that lever is interest rates. And we do understand that. I am critiquing the system, But also the fact that this man, basically what he is saying is like, everything's shit. I gotta say sorry to the poor for fucking them over. But, oh well.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the corporations were a bit greedy during the pandemic. I'm sorry. But unfortunately, you must pay. Because corporations are the good guys and poor people are the bad guys. And you are poor and bad, so unfortunately you must suffer. And no, I don't think I should be the next RBA governor. I literally have 2 brain cells. I'm yet to hear any reasonable justification. Like, yes, we would love inflation to come down, but surely there has to be like progressive monetary policy that we could, like, I don't know, maybe just ask the corporations to participate and like, I don't know, paying a fair share of their taxes or something.
I was chopping potatoes the other day and thought, why am I chopping and cooking potatoes when I could just eat them raw? I'm wasting valuable time that I could spend at a second job. #WPF.
I like that. That's new logic. I like that.
Live Laugh Louis gifted a tier 1 sub to capitalize Miss a Human Right.
Oh my god.
They have given 80 gift subs in the channel.
Lol. I mean, I completely agree, Zero. We agree. We agree. We agree. We agree. We agree. We agree.
Economies. And in many countries, unemployment rates are at multi-decade lows. Headline inflation is declining as the COVID disruptions are overcome, energy prices fall and food prices decline. But concerningly, services price inflation is proving to be very persistent in many economies. As you can see here, it's still above 6%.
Surely the answer to inflation control should be put into a consultancy. I think PwC is a good choice. Oh my god, it's the crossover episode of my dreams.
percent in the United States and 5% in the euro area, and it's proving to be persistent. This persistence reflects strong demand for services and strong growth in wages against the background of weak productivity growth. One source of ongoing uncertainty is how quickly services price inflation globally will moderate and whether the needed moderation here will require further increases in interest rates. It is noteworthy that interest rates are higher in the other English-speaking economies than they are in Australia, and in most countries they're expected to go higher still. So they're higher than Australia and they're expected to go higher.
Now, we know things suck for you, but at least they don't suck more like those other suckers, you know? You should be grateful that you can only barely afford food, peasants, because people in other countries can afford less food. Okay, now I understand you have nothing and you're really struggling at the moment and that's really difficult. But there are other people who have it worse off than you who are struggling more. So don't be mean to me.
Inflation in China is much lower than it is in the rest of the world. This has implications for Australia, not just in terms of the prices of goods in world markets, but also the prices of our resource exports, which have declined recently, reflecting the slowdown in the Chinese economy.
I know! By the way, under like capitalism, basically slowing is like death. Like the idea of any sort of slowing market has these finance bros going like
In aggregate, growth in spending has slowed since the middle of last year as the pandemic bounce back faded and the effects of both higher interest rates and the cost of living pressures began to bite on household finances. And we expect that consumption growth will remain subdued for some time, largely for these same reasons, although stronger population growth is going to provide a bit of an offset to this. Given the large number of factors influencing household finances and spending, some of these factors are shown in this next chart. Employment's been rising very strongly, people have been getting more hours of work, and nominal income growth has been strong.
Interesting. Why do you think the people have been getting more hours of work? That's really interesting. I wonder why that could be happening. Look, I'm not the smartest person in any room, but my guess would be that due to all the corporate restructuring that's happened over the last little while,
lots of people got fired. And I would say that some of the people who didn't get fired might have to make up for the people who did get fired. Therefore, might have been getting more hours of work. The data didn't show that. What did the data show? Because companies bought more labor because of the strong demand. I don't understand how companies buying more labor and like the mass layoffs that have been happening in every fucking company exist in the same fucking thought process. Because those two things have been happening, right? Are the mass layoffs only in the tech space? Like, I understand that the majority of them have only been in the tech space, but I know of places that aren't the tech space where there has been mass layoffs as well. It's been Disney. It's been a government sectors. Like, I know people personally affected by these mass layoffs. The mass layoffs aren't in every company, though, as best we can tell from the employment to population ratio, total hours worked and jobs created. I just feel like some of the statistics that come out in these data sets are just devoid of the actual picture. I don't know. Like, I understand that we have to trust data and science, but a lot of it seems to be incorrect. The problem is you hear about the case of 100 people losing their jobs. You don't hear the 1,000 individuals are getting hired. I'm not saying that anecdotes are better than data. I'm not saying that. I mean, unions have been working hard. There's been strikes in so many different industries because people are so fucking underpaid and overworked. Also, like, why do we sit here and act like having to work more hours is a good thing in this case? Like, legitimately, why is the assumption that more people working more hours of work is a good thing? Like, maybe in this context, in this very specific mathematical context, it's a good thing for the economy? I don't know. By the way, I would just like to clarify for everybody right now, I am no financial expert at all. Don't take what I say on Australian financial policy as the be-all, end-all of, like, good opinions on monetary policy. I'm just trying to make very dry content digestible.
Many households are transitioning from fixed-rate loans over the next few months, and they will experience the same increase in repayments that has occurred for people on variable-rate borrowers. Rents are also...
I think the most terrifying thing that could happen to me as a renter is that the people who own my house just decide to sell it.
And the data that the banks share with us suggests that spending is most subdued amongst households with a mortgage, especially those who borrowed a lot relative to their income in the last few years.
No shit, Sherlock.
Quite weak with spending's quite weak for people who rent.
Sidebar. Just threw that one in there. Just a little by the by. Just a little by the by. I feel like it's time for me. Just hold on for 1 second, chat. Interesting. Interesting. So, if a quarter of Australia's property investments is held by 1% of taxpayers,
Banks are reporting to us that their customers are managing to make the higher mortgage payments, although they have had to cut back on some spending.
Cut back on some spending. I don't know why, but that phrase feels so fucking sinister to me. Man, I'm so lucky that this girls' trip that we're going on was planned months ago, and I paid for it months ago. Because I don't even know if I could say yes if I had to pay for it today. I probably wouldn't.
A third consideration that the board is paying close attention to is the rate of growth in unit labour costs. That's the difference between growth in nominal labour costs and productivity. This is because over time, there is a close relationship between inflation and the rate of growth in unit labour costs.
Can somebody tell me what unit labour costs are in human language? Is it how much we pay people, the workers? The average cost of labour per unit of output and are calculated by dividing total labour costs by real output. They are often used as an indicator of international competitiveness, with higher unit labor costs indicating lower competitiveness. Output seems like it would be akin to profit.
In the very recent times, unit labour costs have been increasing very quickly. In 2022, they rose by 7.5%, which is one of the largest annual increases over the entire inflation targeting period. While the causation between unit labour costs and inflation runs both ways, ongoing strong growth in unit labour costs would underpin ongoing high inflation outcomes in Australia. Now, the best way to achieve a moderation in growth in unit labour costs is through stronger productivity growth, which would also underpin durable increases in real wages and our national wealth, and would make more resources available to fund the public services.
Okay, that makes sense, Vod. So basically, we need to find a way to make everyone more productive so that profits go up to shore up our economy. Line go up. Line must go up.
Now, the reasons for this are complicated and they're not well understood. Productivity growth was slowing before the pandemic, and it's entirely possible that the disruptions caused by the pandemic made things worse.
You don't say, King. You don't say. Could it be? Could it be? Hear me out. Could it be that late-stage capitalism is a little fucked? I mean, I know that's pretty radical of me to say, but could it be that a whole lot of people at the top of corporations engaging in wage theft to push all of the profit to the top of a very specific pile, instead of working, as the free market intends, has just resulted in an extensive wage gap that is becoming just a little bit of a little problem? Maybe? No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying that there's a total amount of stuff being made that we can all consume. If we grow that stuff by more, then people can be paid more and live better. If you just pay people better, but the amount of stuff is the same, the price of stuff just goes up. Right, so what you're saying is that maybe the fact that the minimum wage just increased for the first time in a while, and maybe 10 years of liberal monetary policy has not been functioning as intended? I thought the Liberals were the good money managers. The only reason that would be the case is the amount of stuff we have is not enough to sustain the people we currently have. Like, for example, if we didn't have enough food for the people in our area, then giving the hungry money to buy food would create a food shortage. However, we are already throwing away so much food as it is. It's hard to accept that's the case. That's a very good point, Mamiro. What he's really saying is, to fix inflation, we need to improve productivity. That's the government's job, because there are a lot of improvements that can be made. He's telling the government to help rather than just leaving him with the problem. Well, I agree with that. I want the government to help too. But, I mean, Mamiro's not wrong.
Offsetting this, there was innovation as firms found new ways of working during the pandemic. I think it's unlikely that the innovations in this front were enough to offset the detrimental effects of COVID on productivity from these other channels that I just spoke about. The uncertainty here is what comes next. It's certainly possible that with the pandemic now behind us, productivity growth.
Anyway, who's had COVID recently? Anyone? Anyone's friends been sick recently? Yeah, the pandemic's over because we're here. It's endemic now. It's over.
Growth will pick up. Advances in science and technology will help. Increased digitisation and the use of artificial intelligence offer the prospect of stronger productivity growth.
Did he say the quiet part out loud? Oh, let me just rewind.
Productivity growth will pick up. Advances in science and technology will help. Increased digitisation and the use of artificial intelligence offer the prospect of stronger productivity growth.
Why? Why, King? Is it because you won't have to pay as much money in labor costs? Is it that companies won't have to pay as much money in labor costs? I wonder where that ends up. Can't wait to find out.
So too could further improvements in the way that services are delivered in Australia, as well as reforms to public policy. But there is considerable uncertainty here. What's critical are the trends over time, not the outcomes from quarter to quarter. At the aggregate level, wages growth is still consistent with inflation returning to target, provided that trend productivity growth picks up. Given the importance of this issue and the increased risks on this front, the Board will continue to pay close attention to trends in productivity growth and their implications for the sustainable rate of growth in nominal wages.
There's no way that that is how it functions in real life. Yeah, for some jobs, people are just going to have better tools. Yep, for sure. Absolutely. For editors, people who can use ChatGPT, sure, their productivity is going to go up for a while until it's entirely replaced, VOD. Like, do you actually disagree that there's a whole lot of people who are going to lose their jobs to AI? Do you think that that's not going to happen? Where'd all that extra money from huge increases in productivity the past 10 years go? I actually think it went to government services because poor people are lazy and the government has to spend so much money keeping the poor people alive. If only they were better and more productive workers.
This suggests that financial market participants and economists expect that the RBA Board will be successful in containing inflation over the years ahead. That's welcome. Measures of
I don't know. I, for one, as a millennial, am tired of all the financial crises I've lived through. I'm tired. I don't want to do it anymore. I was told when I was growing up I was allowed to follow my dreams and the world was my oyster. And it turns out there has not been much of an oyster. No, some people will lose their jobs. The question is whether jobs will be lost in aggregate, i.e. whether jobs aren't just replaced by other jobs like in other past cases of big technological change. Okay, but also let me be clear here, that does imply a further change in aggregate share of value, i.e. profit, being captured by owners of tools, capitalists, relative to users of tools, workers. That's where the government has to step in. It's already so bad. I mean, even if you just look recently at the whole shit that went down with PwC, these multinational corporations were being helped to skirt Australian tax law. Hey, we were told about these loopholes. You want to know them, mate? You give us a lot of money, we'll help you make more money. We're cool like that. We got the in, bro. Even if the government does make decent policy, are the companies just not gonna skirt it? This is already fucked. It's already bad and it may get worse. This is my marks wasn't necessarily wrong in the grand scheme of things. Weird how every new technology leads to more money going towards the top, but don't worry. Oh, no. But I just love capitalism because it's really increased innovation. And I love innovation. My favorite type of innovation is the innovation that leads to more profit, which is always good for society because the only thing society wants is profit. I don't know, there's other things that we might like, but they're not profitable. So we don't do those things because we only like things that increase profit. Do you know what I mean, Jellybean?
For households, the main data on inflation expectations relate to just the year ahead. We don't have expectations of inflation over the medium term from households.
It's true, VOD, actually. Do you know, it's funny that you mentioned that because I just saw that depicted in 1923. The invention of the washing machine. That's so good. And look, I think my favorite part of that is when we got all of the materials from the poorer countries so that we could make those things available to a select class of people. I'm not going to lie though, I very much enjoy having a washing machine and I am very glad that I do not have to wash my clothes with a washing board. I've watched enough Outlander to know that, that's not fun, really. And it's hard work. But that's still happening right now. Every day there are thousands of people, usually women, who for the first time do not have to wash clothes by hand. And that's great. That's great. Consistent innovation is great. Like, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not like, let's return to monkey. I'm not saying that. But I think being critical of capitalism is very important at this point. Like, I'm not an expert in monetary policy, right? And it sounds like you're very educated about economic functions. What I am good at is hearing that and then applying other sociological trends to how the economy is functioning and the reality of what that looks like for a lot of people. Like, yes, capitalism is the best thing that we've ever had. There are more people living comfortably today than ever in history, depending on what your measure of comfort is. Like, health outcome wise, it's amazing, but there's room for it to be better. And I am of the basic fundamental belief that capitalism will fail because constant and consistent profit on a planet with finite resources, including labor, is not possible. So if there's a version of capitalism that can shift to a sustainable measure rather than one that is solely reliant on profit and greed and wage theft, then, I could be swayed. But as it exists right now, it's pretty broken. No, VOD, and that's why I'm really enjoying this conversation. I mean, look at it. We've watched 20 minutes of the most dry AF speech ever. And there's a whole lot of people here listening and learning, and you are an important part of that conversation. I'm just trying to make it entertaining. And I really don't mind if my takes are a little bit stupid or not fully educated, because I'm not sitting here to be an academic authority on economic policy. I'm just not. And I would never claim to do that. I've seen other people claim to do that. I would never claim to do that, right? But the reality is that I am more educated about these things than the average person. And that's the scary thing. Trier, I do believe it was exploitative as well, right? Like we have to talk about colonialism. Like, we can go down that entire, yes, how capitalism is unfair, right? We can get into the weeds on that as well, for sure. But I hope that most people in this channel right now would already know that that is something I am very aware of and will talk about a lot. Yeah. What do you mean? Countries were built off the backs of slaves and exploiting countries? Curious. Lucky Australia never did that. Oh, wait.
Finally, putting all this together, we remain on the narrow path that I spoke about earlier, but there are significant risks. We're particularly attentive to the risk that inflation stays too high for too long. If that happens, expectations will adjust, inflation will persist, interest rates and unemployment will be higher, and the cost of...
Oh yeah, I don't think capitalism brought us innovation. I feel like that is like what a lot of free market bro copes say. They're like, capitalism is the full sole reason that we have any innovation whatsoever. I completely agree with you.
...of living pressures that Australian families are experiencing will continue. The board is seeking to avoid this. And yesterday's further increase in interest rates provides greater confidence that inflation will come back to target within a reasonable time frame. Some further tightening of monetary policy may be required, but that will depend upon how the...
We're so fucked. I, for one, have never been more grateful to not own a house, but I am a renter and I am so fucked. Anyway, are you enjoying your education about Australian fiscal policy? Well, could I entice you into a $5 sub right here at twitch.tv/pixelsmixel, which definitely isn't a waste of your money in these trying times.
...the economy and how inflation evolve. The board will continue to pay close attention to developments in the global economy, trends in household spending and the outlook for inflation in the labour market. The board remains resolute in its determination to return inflation to target, and we will do what's necessary to achieve that. Thank you very much for listening this morning, and I'd be happy to answer some questions.
I don't think I can handle the questions. I think it's enough. I think that's enough existential crisis for one night, don't you think? Hey guys, did you know inflation happens? And did you know that the board remain resolute in their decision to do everything to stop it, including killing off some of the poor? Sorry. Sorry. I'm a bit unhinged. I'm so... I